Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. My love called me late, and I shouldn't have answered. But I did. And that single decision, one quiet, trembling hello, brought back every emotion I had carefully packed away, every ache I thought I had healed. It was one of those nights when the air feels heavy with things unsaid, when silence has its own heartbeat. I remember the way my phone glowed in the dark, cutting through the stillness of my room like a secret I wasn't ready to face. It was 11:47 p.m. The kind of hour that asks you questions you'd rather ignore. I had been sitting by the window, watching the rain trace slow, uncertain paths down the glass. The house was quiet, too quiet, the way it gets when you live alone long enough that you start to hear the hum of your own thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone to call. Especially not him. When his name appeared on my screen, I froze. The memory of his voice felt both distant and dangerously close, like the echo of a song I used to hum without realizing it. I almost let it ring out. Almost. But my hand had a mind of its own, and before I could think twice, I swiped to answer. "Hi," he said. Just that. One syllable, filled with the same warmth that once made me believe I could start over at any age. I didn't answer right away. My throat tightened around words that refused to form. He laughed softly, the way he used to when he knew I was nervous. "Still taking your time, I see." There was comfort in that voice. A dangerous kind of comfort, the kind that made you forget why you ever walked away. We talked at first about simple things, the weather, his work, the way autumn seemed to have arrived too quickly this year. I told him the rain hadn't stopped all evening, and he said he missed the sound of it against my window. It felt strange, how easily our conversation slipped into old rhythms, like we were rehearsing a dance we both remembered by heart. After a few minutes, silence stretched between us again, not awkward, but heavy, like both of us were standing at the edge of something we couldn't name. I could hear him breathing softly on the other end. Then, he said it. "I shouldn't be calling you this late." I laughed, quietly. "You probably shouldn't," I said. "But you did." He sighed. "I know. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about you. About the way we ended things." I leaned back in my chair, letting my eyes drift to the reflection of the city lights on the wet street below. There was a time I would have given anything to hear him say that, to know he was thinking about me, missing me. But tonight, it didn't feel the same. It felt heavier. Like opening a door I had finally managed to close. He told me about his days now, how quiet his evenings had become, how he'd tried dating again but nothing ever felt right. He said everyone seemed too busy, too distant. "You used to listen," he said. "You didn't just hear me. You listened." I didn't know how to answer that. Part of me wanted to tell him I still cared, that I still thought about him when the rain came and the world felt too empty. But another part, the part that had learned to live without him, knew better. "You were the one who left," I said softly. He didn't respond for a while. The rain grew louder. I could almost picture him, sitting somewhere dim, maybe with a half-empty glass beside him, trying to find the right words. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said finally. "For both of us." I closed my eyes. "Were you?" He didn't answer that either. And maybe he didn't have to. Because deep down, I already knew. Sometimes people don't walk away because they stop loving you. They walk away because love starts asking for more than they know how to give. As we talked, the hours slipped by unnoticed. My tea had gone cold, my phone battery hovered at 12%. Yet neither of us seemed willing to end it. Every word felt like a thread connecting us again, fragile but alive. He told me he had kept one of my old letters. "You remember the one you wrote after that weekend by the lake?" he asked. "You said it was the first time in years you felt seen." I smiled faintly. "I remember. You made me believe I could be someone better," he said quietly. His honesty stung more than I expected. I wanted to tell him that he was better, that I never stopped believing in him, even after he left. But I couldn't bring myself to say it. Instead, I whispered, "Maybe we both believed too much." He exhaled softly, a sound that carried more sadness than words ever could. "Maybe." Then came another pause, one that felt like the world holding its breath. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't walked away?" he asked. I hesitated. Outside, The rain was easing, leaving the streets shining under the streetlights. Sometimes, I said. But not in the way you think. I don't wonder what could have been. I wonder if it would have lasted. He didn't argue. He just listened. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the strange comfort of being understood, even in silence. When the clock struck 2 a.m., I realized how late it had gotten. My eyes were tired, my heart even more so. I should go, I said. Yeah, he whispered. I know. Neither of us hung up right away. We just stayed there, listening to the faint static between us, as if the connection itself didn't want to end. Good night, he said finally. Good night, I replied when I set my phone down. The quiet in the room felt different, deeper somehow. The rain had stopped completely, leaving behind the faint scent of wet earth and something bittersweet in the air. I stood by the window again, watching the reflection of the moon in the puddles below. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel angry. Or sad. Just aware. Aware that sometimes, closure doesn't come with grand gestures or perfect words. Sometimes it comes with a late-night call you shouldn't have answered, but did, and in doing so, you finally understood what peace feels like. That night didn't change the past, but it changed something in me. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet conversation would be the beginning of a truth I had been avoiding. That love can end, but care doesn't have to. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. The next morning, sunlight crept softly across the edge of my curtains, but it didn't bring the usual warmth. I sat there, staring at my phone on the nightstand as if it still held his voice, frozen somewhere between memory and reality. The screen was dark now, but I could still see his name glowing faintly in my mind. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that quiet, hesitant high replaying over and over. It's strange how a single voice can open 1,000 doors you thought were locked. I made coffee, the same way I always did, 2 sugars, a touch of milk, and yet it tasted different. Memories have a way of changing flavor, you know? The simplest things start carrying weight again. All morning, I tried to convince myself that the call was just a moment of weakness. A small interruption in the calm I had built for myself. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't just a call. It was the echo of something unfinished. Around noon, I went for a walk. The rain had washed everything clean, the pavement, the leaves, even the air felt lighter. But inside, I still felt heavy. I passed the bakery where we used to meet on Sunday mornings. The same old woman was still there behind the counter, folding napkins, humming to herself. I almost stepped inside, almost. But I kept walking. I didn't need the taste of the past today. Not yet. When I got home, I noticed something strange, his number still at the top of my recent calls list. I hovered my thumb over it for a while, not sure what I wanted more, to hear his voice again or to erase it forever. I didn't do either. I just stared, caught between longing and reason. By evening, the sky had turned golden, the kind of color that makes the world look softer than it is. I poured myself a glass of wine, turned on some music, and tried to let the day fade quietly. That's when my phone buzzed again. Just one short message, "Are you okay?" 3 simple words. I stared at them for a long time. It would have been easy to ignore, to pretend I didn't see it. But I couldn't. Not after last night. "I'm fine," I typed back. Then deleted it. Because it wasn't true. Finally, I wrote, "I don't know." He replied almost immediately. "Can we talk?" I should have said no. Every part of me knew that. But curiosity, or maybe hope, won again. "Okay," I texted when he called. His voice was softer this time, slower. "I didn't mean to make things harder for you," he said. "You didn't," I replied. "You just made me remember." He was quiet for a while. "That wasn't my intention. I wanted to hear you again. To know if you're really okay." "I am," I said, though the words trembled. "Mostly." He laughed lightly, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I guess that's as much as any of us can say." There was something different in his tone, something fragile, almost tired. I asked if everything was all right, and he hesitated before answering. "My mother's been sick," he said quietly. "I've been trying to handle it, but I don't know. It's been harder than I thought." That softened me. For all the hurt between us, I still cared. I couldn't stop that part of me. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't know." He told me about the hospital visits, the long nights, the way time feels slower when you're waiting for someone to get better. I listened. I didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix anything. Just listened, because sometimes, that's all someone needs. After a while, his voice changed. You were always good at that, he said. Listening. Making space. I guess I still remember how, I said with a small smile. You do, he replied. Then, softer, I missed that. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of gratitude, of pain, of something we didn't have a name for anymore. I realized then that maybe this wasn't about rekindling what we had. Maybe it was about forgiveness. Not the kind you give once and forget, but the quiet kind, the kind that happens slowly, between pauses and shared breaths. When we finally said goodbye that night, it felt different. I didn't feel pulled backward. I felt lighter. Like something had been unknotted inside me. After the call, I went back to my window. The streetlights shimmered over puddles again, and I thought about how life has this quiet rhythm. It takes, it gives, it circles back when you least expect it, and maybe that's what this was. Not a second chance at love, but a second chance at understanding. To see him not as the man who left, but as the man who, even years later, still knew when to reach out and say, "Are you okay?" I didn't know what would happen next. Maybe nothing at all. But for the first time in a long while, I was all right with not knowing. Sometimes peace doesn't come with distance, it comes with the courage to answer one more call, even when your heart whispers that you shouldn't. Days passed after that second call, and for a while, everything felt oddly calm. He didn't call again, and I didn't expect him to. But he lingered somewhere in my thoughts, like the faint scent of perfume that stays on a scarf long after you've put it away. I'd catch myself thinking about him during the quietest moments, when I was making coffee, when the evening light touched the walls just right, when the world outside felt still enough for memory to slip in. Then, one evening, I received another message. "Can I stop by? Just for a few minutes? I have something for you." I stared at the screen for a long time. My first instinct was to say no. Not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. I had built something steady out of solitude, thin but strong, and I was afraid to shake it. But curiosity, or maybe that same quiet kindness that always betrayed me, won again. "All right," I typed back. "Just a few minutes." The hours that followed felt endless. I cleaned the kitchen, rearranged the books on the table, even changed the flowers in the vase, lilies this time, my mother's favorite. It wasn't about impressing him. It was about control, about pretending I could prepare for whatever his presence might bring. When the doorbell rang, I froze. My hands were trembling before I even reached for the handle. And there he was, standing in the doorway, holding a small paper bag. The years had softened him. His hair was a little grayer, his eyes more tired, but the smile, it was still the same. Familiar and dangerous. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey," I echoed. He stepped inside like someone afraid of breaking the air. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was thick, filled with things too delicate to name. He handed me the bag. "It's just coffee," he said. "The one you used to like. They finally started selling it again." I smiled despite myself. "You remembered." He shrugged. "I remember a lot more than I should." We sat at the table. I poured us both some tea instead of coffee, because I didn't trust the smell of the past to linger too long. He looked around the room, noticing the small changes, the new curtains, the framed photograph on the wall. "You've made it feel warm in here," he said. "I've had time," I replied. He nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. He placed it on the table, pushing it toward me. "I wrote this a while ago," he said. "After I left. I never sent it." I hesitated. "What's in it?" "The truth," he said simply. I didn't open it right away. The envelope sat there, quiet but heavy, between us. "Why now?" I asked. He looked down, his fingers tracing the rim of his teacup. "Because I realized you never got the ending you deserved. You let me go with more grace than I earned. And I've carried that guilt longer than I can explain." Something in his tone broke through me. Not because I hadn't heard apologies before, but because this one wasn't asking for forgiveness, it was giving it. I finally opened the letter. The handwriting was his, slanted, rushed, but sincere. It wasn't long, but it was full of things I'd never heard him say aloud. He wrote about fear, about how love scared him more than loss, about the way he always thought he'd have another chance. He said he'd learned that silence can wound as deeply as words. By the time I finished reading, I realized I was crying not out of pain, but out of release. It was like finally setting down a heavy box you'd been carrying for years without realizing how much it hurt your hands. He reached across the table, his hand stopping halfway. I didn't come here to ask for another chance, he said. I just wanted you to know I see it now, all the things I missed, all the ways you stayed when I didn't deserve it. For a long time, I couldn't speak. I just looked at him, at the man who once felt like my entire world, and realized how much smaller that world had become when I let it revolve around him. But I also realized something else, how far I had come from that version of myself. I'm glad you came, I said finally. Not because I needed this, but because I didn't know I did. He smiled softly. You always did have a way with words. We talked for another hour. Not about us, not about what was lost, but about simple, ordinary things. His mother was doing better. He was thinking about moving closer to the coast. I told him about my new garden, about how I'd learned to enjoy quiet mornings again. When he stood to leave, he hesitated by the door. Take care of yourself, he said. I will, I replied. You too. As the door closed behind him, the silence returned, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. I looked at the envelope again, folded neatly beside my cup, and smiled. That night, I didn't feel the urge to replay our conversations or wonder what if. I didn't need to. Because some stories don't need to be rewritten, they just need to be closed, gently, with gratitude. And for the first time in years, I went to bed without the weight of wondering whether I should have answered that call. Maybe I shouldn't have, but if I hadn't, I never would have found the kind of peace that comes from finally letting go, not in anger, but in understanding. Weeks passed since that evening. The letter he left behind now rests in the small wooden box on my dresser, the same box where I keep things that once mattered, not because I can't let them go, but because they remind me how far I've come. Every so often, I take it out, run my fingers over the creased paper, and feel that strange blend of sadness and peace. It's like touching a scar, proof of pain, yes, but also of healing. I never heard from him again after that night. No messages, no calls. And that silence, surprisingly, felt like the most genuine gift he could have given me. It meant he meant what he said. He came for closure, not to reopen what we had buried. For a while, I wondered if I should reach out, even just to check in. But then I realized that some goodbyes are meant to last. That's what makes them right. Life slowly found its rhythm again. The mornings became gentler, the evenings less heavy. I started tending to my little garden more often. The roses bloomed late that year, but they bloomed all the same. And each time I watered them, I thought about how love is not unlike a garden. You plant what you hope will grow, but sometimes what survives is not what you expected. Sometimes, it's the wildflowers you didn't plan for that end up taking root. I began spending more time outside. Neighbors would wave as they passed, and I'd smile back, a real smile this time, not the practiced kind that hides tiredness. I even started volunteering at the local library on weekends. Funny how I'd forgotten how much I loved the sound of pages turning, the soft hum of quiet rooms filled with stories. Maybe that's what life really is, a collection of chapters we don't always choose, but learn to live through anyway. One afternoon, while shelving books, I found myself staring at a novel I used to love years ago. The main character had said something I'd underlined once in pen: we remember the ones who made us feel something real, even if it hurt. I smiled, tracing the old ink. Because that was exactly it. He made me feel something real. And though it hurt for a long time, it also woke something in me, a reminder that my heart was still capable of feeling deeply, even after disappointment. That night, I sat by the window again, tea in hand, rain tapping softly against the glass, so much like that first night he called. But this time, there was no tension, no ache. Only gratitude. For him, for myself, for the quiet courage it takes to answer one last call and let it teach you what peace really means. I thought about how differently love looks at 40, 50, even 60. It's not about grand gestures anymore, or endless promises. It's about presence. About being seen and heard in small ways. About knowing when to hold on, and when to open your hands and let something beautiful drift away with grace. I didn't regret answering his call anymore. If anything, I was thankful I did. Because that late-night conversation didn't bring him back, it brought me back. Back to my voice, my stillness, my strength. It reminded me that love isn't always meant to last forever, but it always leaves something behind, a lesson, a memory, a softer heart, and sometimes, that's enough. A few months later, as winter started to whisper through the trees, I received a small postcard in the mail. There was no return address, just a coastal scene, a lighthouse, the sea stretching endlessly behind it. On the back, in familiar handwriting, were 4 words: "Thank you for listening." I smiled. No tears this time. Just a quiet, content sigh. I placed the card next to his letter in the wooden box, closed the lid, and felt a sense of completeness I hadn't known before. That night, I stood on my porch, the sky deep blue, the air crisp and clear. The world felt open again. Not because someone had come back into my life, but because I had finally stepped back into my own. So when people ask me if I regret answering that call, I tell them the truth: no, I don't. Because some calls aren't meant to rekindle love. Some are meant to remind you that you survived it. That you grew. That even when your heart trembled at the sound of a familiar voice, you still found the courage to listen one last time and then let go. My love called me late that night. I shouldn't have answered. But I did. And because I did, I learned that not every ending is a loss. Sometimes, it's the beginning of peace.